We've been telling you about the baby formula shortage. Biden is holding an event today. Press not going to be there, but they'll give a readout to the press on the baby formula shortage. He's going to be speaking with retailers and manufacturers. Apparently, that's from the White House. But there's something else going on here. Biden administration shipping pallets of baby formula to the border. That's the town hall piece. It's up at clayandbuck.com right now from Katie Pavlich, who joins us right now from Fox News. She's a townhall.com columnist as well. Katie, great to have you on the program.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us about this one, because we had, Katie, we could have taken phone calls for the whole show yesterday from just anxious and pretty furious parents who are scrambling to get baby formula. Your piece in Town Hall lets everybody know that, well, there's no problem with baby formula at the southern border. What's going on?
Yeah, so Republican Congressman Kat Cammack had a Border Patrol agent contact her, sending her photos of stocked shelves inside a Border Patrol processing facility with baby formula, and told her that there are pallets of baby formula that have been delivered to these processing centers. So while shelves in the stores across America are bare and parents are driving hours and hours to find formula for their children, the federal government clearly has some kind of contract to buy up the limited supply and deliver it not to those stores, but to processing centers on the southern border. So this, of course, brings up two issues. The first is that the crisis at the southern border is a man-made Biden administration problem. And as we dig further into the reasons behind this baby formula shortage, it's clear that that's also another Biden administration federal government problem, with the FDA shutting down a major plant, that then not reopening it, wrapping it in a bunch of, red tape. And now, of course, there's a limited supply, and much of that is now going to solve the crisis on the border, with people coming across with their children who, of course, still need to be fed as well. So it's infuriating. It's frustrating. Parents are, wondering where the next, case of that is going to come for their family. And there seems to be plenty available for people who broke the law to get into the country, but not enough available for people who are citizens of the country.
Katie, it's great work by you, and it also shines a light on how little attention is being paid to the border, that it might take a baby formula shortage and therefore baby formula being shipped to the border for many in the media actually cover anything there. As we are talking right now, I just got an alert sent to my phone from the Wall Street Journal, and the headline is, baby formula shortage could last for months. In other words, this is not something that is going to leave anytime soon. They are now limiting how much parents can buy inside of stores when they actually find baby formula there. Katie, we know from the pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of us experienced this. When there is a fear of a shortage in a product, it actually exacerbates the shortage, because when people find it, they buy more of it than they otherwise would. How does this get fixed for so many moms and dads out there that are trying desperately to find baby formula all over the country?
Well, the FDA could work to get this major plant back open after there was a recall. It's been months now. They keep saying they want it to be safe for parents and babies. Obviously, everybody wants that to be true. But they keep throwing up these roadblocks to reopen this plant that supplies the country with something like 50% of the baby formula. Also, I would note that yesterday, the incoming press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, whose first day starts tomorrow, she's currently the deputy press secretary, was asked specifically about how the Biden administration is working to manage this crisis as it gets worse. She gave, a paragraph worth of statements about how they're working on it 24/7, how they're looking at all of the options, the usual bureaucratic speak. And then when their follow-up question was asked about who exactly is handling the situation, she literally laughed out loud and said that she did not know.
We played that audio.
So
it's crazy.
That's a problem. So they're claiming that they're dealing with this issue. I'm wondering where Pete Buttigieg is at this point. And the federal government can do a lot when it comes to commerce and figuring out how to look at these contracts maybe that are going to the border and maybe limit the number of baby formula pallets that are sent there before they're sent to American stores across the country. There's a couple of different options they have, but we haven't heard much about it.
We're speaking to Katie Pavlich, editor at townhall.com, Fox News contributor. Katie, I know you spent a lot of time down at the border and have a lot of contacts in Border Patrol, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. What are you hearing from them about what's going to go on here with the Title 42 revocation, which is supposed to happen here in a couple of weeks? I know there's a judge that's involved at this stage, but also given the number that just came out yesterday, 107,000 overdoses, mostly fentanyl, and most of that, a vast majority of that's coming across the border illegally. Feels like there's renewed urgency to get this right. What are your Border Patrol contacts and folks telling you?
Look, they're saying basically Border Patrol has been turned into a processing agency and Immigration and Customs Enforcement has been turned into a travel agency. The administration's response to Title 42 getting taken off and the estimates of 18,000 people a day crossing the border is not to deter people from coming, to put up barriers to entry. It's to simply open up new processing centers so they can process these people through and then give them a plane ticket to wherever they want to go. That's the solution that they're offering here. And Border Patrol is, terrible morale at this point. Their job and their mission is to protect the homeland from foreign threats, from drug traffickers, as you mentioned, from human traffickers, from human smugglers. But this administration's policies have been to simply process thousands of people through the system and to let them go into the country. It's kind of like having a leak in your roof and putting out a bucket, and then as the bucket fills up and the leak gets bigger, they just add a couple buckets. So that's what they're doing. They're going to open up new processing centers. They're going to put people in the front of the line for Title 42 processing in terms of the court system, making the backlog even worse. So that's where we're headed as a result of this.
Katie, when we talk about baby formula shortages and the border being a sieve and inflation at 8.5 or 8.3%, you've got obviously murder rates skyrocketing everywhere. You're really smart. You're good at communication skills. If Joe Biden came to you and he said, Katie, I need you to make a pitch for something that I've done really well so far in my presidency, nearly 18 months. Buck and I are fairly smart guys. We can't even come up with a pitch for Joe Biden as we get closer to the midterms. I'm not talking about the abortion angle. What has Joe Biden actually done well? Can you even it truly is incomprehensible how bad he has been, even for people who expected, and I think Buck and I are in this camp, and I bet you are too, that it wasn't going to be good. But I don't think any of us expected him to be this bad. Could you even point to anything that hasn't been a disaster for him?
Well, no, his pitch is not to the entire country, as he promised, Mr. Unification. His pitch is to the far left of his party. He is controlled by the far left of his party. If you look at the move they made yesterday to stop the leasing in Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico, they think that is a pitch to the base, hoping that the base gets out in midterms because midterm elections are base elections. That's who he's pitching to. That's who he wants to talk to. That's who he's communicating to. So if you see it from that perspective, there are a number of far left policies that he's implemented that he would see as a success, that they would see as a success. But for the rest of the country, it has been a complete and total disaster. It's like you look at those polls that show, do you think that Joe Biden is doing a good job? And like 30% of the country still says yes. And you wonder who those people are. Well, that's the far left of the base that thinks that these things that he's doing are good for the country, or like a cleaning up of whatever they think that Trump did. And that's who he's speaking to. He's not speaking to the entire country.
We got Katie's piece linked up at clayandbuck.com on plenty of formula at the border, but not for all the rest of the American people. Katie, thanks so much for being with us. Come back soon.
Thanks, guys. I will. Thanks so much. See ya.
We are joined now by Rob Smith. He's an Iraq War veteran, political analyst, host of Can't Cancel Rob Smith, a podcast which just launched yesterday. Rob, I'm going to tee you up early here with a lot of the topics that we've been discussing so far today. And over the past couple of days. What do you think about us spending $40 billion on Ukraine while we can't even get baby formula on the shelves in this country for moms and dads running around trying to feed their young kids?
Not only do I think that this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard and the most absurd thing that I've ever heard, it's one of those things that actually makes me angry. It makes me physically angry when I found out that this was happening. And when I think about this, and when you think about $40 billion being sent to the Ukraine, while like you said, we have baby formula shortages, while people are struggling, paying more for groceries, paying more for gas, it's outrageous, and it makes me absolutely angry. And I need to make a point right here. Now, a lot of people, I'm conservative, identified myself, I vote Republican, all that stuff. But a lot of people really do like to think that this is just something that comes from the left or something that comes from a couple people on the right. And I think what people need to realize sometimes that there is a uniparty in Washington, D.C. that is united on this stuff. And we have only a couple of bold and brave Congress people that are bold enough to vote against this stuff.
Rob, there's also a real concern, and I'm seeing it start to, speaking of the uniparty, not just on the spending front, but when it also comes to foreign policy, interventionism, getting involved in things more than the American people actually want. We're hearing a lot more now from Democrats and from Republicans about how Ukraine is an opportunity to bleed Russia, or Ukraine is an opportunity to offset, Russia's ambitions in the region. And they even will say things like, we're at war or we're close to war with Russia and Ukraine. I think that there has somehow been a mission creep that has happened, and very few people have noticed this, and it really is concerning. As we all know, Putin has thousands of nuclear weapons.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that I hate about this, Buck, is that you have all of these chicken hawks, right, coming from D.C., and they're talking tough about Russia and Putin and all this stuff. Most of these people have not served. Most of these people do not know anybody that is serving. Most of these people do not have family members that have served. So you have a lot of people talking this very tough talk when it comes to Russia. And like you said, this is a nuclear power. And this is something that really irritates me. It's something that is very concerning, how sort of casually these people are ramping up this rhetoric and pushing us into this war. Now, I'm not entirely sure. Now, Russia has always been an adversary of ours. I definitely get that. But I am not entirely sure when it became our responsibility to send all of these billions of dollars to Ukraine and try to bleed them to sort of launch this offensive against Russia. And so we have people talking about no-fly zones. We have people talking about this tough talk against Russia. It is absolutely insane to me when we are going through the toughest times that we have seen in years right here at home. But you have to understand, and I go back to the swamp and I go back to the uniparty, these people do not care about the average working American. What these people care about is making their donors happy. What these people care about is continuing to fund the war machine. What these people care about is continuing to see their stocks go higher and higher and higher when they use their positions to sort of bring up this rhetoric a lot.
Rob, we saw Dave Chappelle get attacked on the stage in L.A. a couple weeks ago, and then the DA in L.A. decided not to charge his attacker with a felony. There's been a lot of discussion, certainly with Dave Chappelle, about the trans universe as it compares to the gay world and all of that. What do you think about kind of the unholy alliance that exists right now when you see all of the discussions about teaching kids who are first grade about transgender-related issues? How in the LBGT larger community, how much conversation is going on? How much agreement is there on issues like these in the trans universe?
Well, the thing about it is there's not. Like, you guys both know I'm a gay dude myself. I don't identify with the LGBTQIA or any of that stuff. So what's going on here is twofold. First of all, you have gays and lesbians in America right now that have basically the rights that they have fought for decades and decades and decades. We're talking about don't ask, don't tell repeal, being able to serve openly in the military. We're talking about the right to get married. Fine. Now, what the radical trans agenda has done is it has latched itself to the very powerful organization that existed to advocate for gay rights and have done so for decades. And so gays and lesbians don't even exist anymore to these people. They're talking about trans, they're talking about Q, they're talking about 100 different genders. They're talking about literally transitioning, kids that are as young as 5, 6, 7 years old. And so that has a lot to do with the fact that we are seeing, thanks to the work of places like Libs of TikTok, where you see these people have infiltrated the public school system, and the agenda that they're pushing to these kids has nothing to do with gay and lesbian and everything to do with this sort of radical gender ideology that has taken over that entire movement. Like I say, guys, this has nothing to do with the average gay and lesbian American who just wants to live their lives and exist in peace. And this has everything to do with a very, very, very far left sort of transgender, gender identity cult ideology that has taken over that entire movement to the point where most sane gays and lesbians do not even want to be involved with it anymore.
Speaking of Rob Smith, he's a Iraq War veteran, political commentator. He's got a new podcast that just launched yesterday. Can't cancel Rob Smith, but you can listen to him, and you should. You should check it out. Rob, I'm just wondering, before we let you go, Clay and I have this ongoing discussion, and we are so curious. And I know maybe it sounds like we're just a bunch of guys sitting around, smoking cigars, trying to figure out the trajectory of the Democrat Party's politics. It is kind of a fun game to play. But Biden runs again. How do they run him again, given what's going on? But they can't run Kamala because nobody would vote for Kamala, and they can't replace Kamala with Mayor Pete because that wouldn't look good. And if they brought Hillary out of quasi-retirement, I mean, what do you think happens? We go back and forth on this all the time. How do you think this shakes out?
I do not think that Biden runs again at the top of the ticket. Here's the thing. As of right now, they're doing a very good job at hiding Biden, right? So we see, if you're a conservative-leaning person, you're somebody that is just very anti-Biden, we see all of the missteps. We see him struggling with the teleprompters. We see him, not knowing where he is half the time. They cannot take that out and run that again in a national election, because then everything that we've been talking about, the vast majority of the public is going to see. Now, they also cannot run Kamala at the top of the ticket as well, because she is so deeply unlikable. She couldn't get past 1% when she was running. I think, honestly, that Mayor Pete is playing his cards right. I think that he will be on the ticket at some point. They're going to have to find something to do with Kamala Harris. But I do not believe that either Biden or Kamala Harris is going to be on any part of that ticket in 2024. I do not see that happening. Kamala is too weak. She has failed. She is good at being a politician and bad at every single thing else. Biden is old. He is weak. He is senile looking. He is ineffectual. And you cannot put that out in front of the American public in the rigors that a presidential campaign would have to sort of get from him. I don't see it happening.
Rob, fantastic stuff, my man. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys.
The ultra MAGA path, the great MAGA king. Joe Biden apparently thinks he's going to stop the bleeding in the midterms for Democrats by giving his opponents cool nicknames. We have Kennedy with us right now. Kennedy from Fox Business. She has a great show over there. You should all check out every night, Kennedy. And, from other places, The Outnumbered Couch, etc. Kennedy, thanks for being with us.
That'll show them.
Yeah, I was going to say, great.
Which nickname that his supporters love?
Right, I was going to say, which one is better, Great MAGA King or Ultra MAGA? Like, which one's going to sell more T-shirts?
Well, Ultra MAGA sounds like a light beer that you'd get if you were on keto.
And Biden's speech this week, I got to say, even his supporters, I think, are recognizing that whatever magic they were expecting this guy or to pull off, whatever they thought he was going to pull out of the hat, so to speak, it's just not there for this administration. So where do they go from here?
Unfortunately, they go to Kamala Harris, and that's why people are up in arms, because she is arguably worse. He's very bad at defining inflation and explaining what they're going to do about it. Believe it or not, she is abhorrent at that. Watching her explain inflation is something I do when I'm in a bad mood, because I cackle hysterically like she does when she's asked an uncomfortable question, because she has no idea what she's talking about.
So, Kennedy, first of all, thanks for coming on. The only thing I can say that is a positive right now about the economy, and in particular the stock market, as we're about to go underneath the number that existed on January 21st January 20th of 2021 when Joe Biden took office for both the S&P 500 and the Dow is everyone is talking about how awful the economy is. And sometimes when everybody agrees the economy is awful and that we're in an awful place, that's a great buying indicator. I'm really stretching to try to think about a positive here at all. Are there any positives that you can see on Joe Biden's economic plans or where we are for the next couple of years with him in charge, or at least him or Kamala in charge?
No, the only people this is good for are some of our golden Americans who are on fixed incomes that are chained to interest rates. So they're the only ones who really benefit when interest rates go up, because it's going to be more expensive to pay off credit cards and get loans from mortgages and cars and things like that. And things are already expensive. So you're really hamstringing the middle class here. And it's getting tougher and tougher to, A, find people to blame, and B, try and shellac this turd because people out there are really, really hurting. And, Wall Street is not just for billionaires. People who have 401ks and any sort of investment tools that help them save for retirement, that stuff is being wiped out. And if you are in your 50s or 60s and you're looking at retirement, you're now looking at working at least 4 or 5 more years if the economy continues to do what it's doing. And, blaming President Trump like it's September of 2020, it's not doing anyone any favors, because all that does is give this administration an excuse to not do anything.
Speaking of Kennedy from Fox Business, where she's got a show you should all check out, Kennedy, good name, clear reason for the name. Kennedy, $40 billion. Speaking of what, folks here are dealing with all kinds of problems. And I understand the government spends a lot of money on a lot of things, and people could say, oh, we walk and chew gum at the same time in the federal government, whatever. $40 billion is a lot of money. $40 billion here, $40 billion there. It does start to add up after a while. That's being sent to Ukraine. I mean, there are a number of levels on which I think this is troubling to people. One is it feels like these days we don't have money to be throwing around, but also how much more involved should we get in Ukraine?
Well, the more we get involved, the more we want a return on our investment. So if you're sending humanitarian aid, the return on investment is people living, and we are working toward peace. If the money is going toward arms to sort of piecemeal help Ukraine stay in a long-term conflict, that's really the worst case scenario. I mean, that's awful for them. It's not good for, innocent Russian people who are now suffering under sanctions because they can't get rid of their tyrannical despot. And now you've got the United States that is facing, this record inflation. Gas prices are high. You cannot blame everything or most things on Ukraine. And on top of that, young families can't find baby formula. It's like they're celebrating abortion. They're turning a blind eye to the fact that there's this formula shortage, and it is a real crisis for anyone who's had a baby. That's a terrifying prospect, not being able to feed the most vulnerable member of your family with no alternative. So I applaud the Republicans who voted against the $40 billion package. And it's not that they don't love Ukraine, it's that they know there's no accountability here, and what we have is protracted war.
Kennedy, I've argued, and I think Buck is in this camp too, I bet you are as well, that the best thing Republicans can do right now is just try to run out the clock. Meaning we're going to have most congresspeople and senators that are up for re-election leave D.C. and go back in the summer and in the fall to campaign. Is the best thing that could happen for the economy right now for Republicans to just prevent Joe Biden from trying to fix the economy and pass trillion-dollar spending bills on top of trillion-dollar spending bills, and just hope we can run out the clock and then get a Republican House and Senate to moderate the awful economic decisions being made in the White House right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, one of Biden's big tactics right now is to blame Trump for deficit spending But that's what you're doing if you're spending trillions of dollars on plans that you have no way of paying for. And now, the bill is starting to show up, and it's showing up in the form of inflation, which is just yet another tax on people, especially working Americans. So I wish Washington would do less. I wish the Fed didn't exist. I wish they would pass fewer laws. I wish they would repeal more laws. That's one of the things I like about the Trump administration. But doing nothing is a lot better than this fuss budgetary and this busybody socialistic spending, this idea that government can solve all the problems. Naturally, government creates more problems than it solves, and the bigger it gets, the bigger your problems get. And people should see that from the pandemic, from inflation, and from everything else that is happening right now around them. Those are the failures of big government that can, at some point, it will no longer be able to support itself, let alone the hundreds of millions of people relying on it.
Check out Kennedy's show, Kennedy, on Fox Business. Miss Kennedy, great to have you. Come back soon.
Clay, Buck, you're both a dream come true. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad somebody thinks we're
I was going to say,
hungry.
she knows what's up. She knows.
Yeah.
She knows the deal.
Alex Berenson is with us. He used to be on Twitter. He now is banned there. We talked about some of the drama surrounding Elon Musk's potential acquisition of Twitter in the first hour of the show. But Alex, first of all, thanks for coming on. Second, I saw something that my jaw dropped, and I mentioned it to close the first hour. CNN wrote an article acknowledging that many of the people dying with COVID now have received both of the COVID shots, initial COVID shots. In fact, they said almost half of the people dying with COVID in January were double vaccinated for COVID. I don't know if you read that article, but I imagine that the fact that CNN is now writing this is just further validation and vindication for the surrounding COVID vaccine story.
Yes. I mean, people are starting to admit this. And honestly, those numbers are only going up. I have data that I'm going to put out on my Substack very soon. One of the things that's happening, by the way, is that because the data is looking worse and worse for the vaccines, more jurisdictions, more states and countries are starting to not report it. They're starting to not report these sort of weekly or monthly numbers. I mean, in the U.S., the data has always been kind of scattershot. But even in a place like the UK, they've stopped reporting it. But there are still places that are reporting it. And for example, in British Columbia, where there's very sort of up-to-date data, almost everyone who dies has been vaccinated and boosted in the last month. I'm talking about not January, but in the last month, fewer than 10% of the people who died were unvaccinated. So
wow.
the vaccine, yeah, and it's amazing actually. And so vaccine efficacy looks like it's pretty close to zero right now against infection and against serious outcomes for Omicron. Omicron, listen, the vaccines were always not what they were cracked up to be, but Omicron appears to have made them basically useless.
So if the vaccines are truly basically useless, what does that tell us about where we are headed in the summer and the fall of 2022 from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not going to try to duck it. I don't think we know because it depends on two crucial things. One is, are we going to get another variant that's worse than Omicron? Omicron isn't that dangerous, right? It is very virulent, but it isn't. I mean, I'm sorry, it is very contagious, but it isn't that virulent. So you see these numbers showing that a huge number of children, for example, have antibodies now in the United
75%
States. 75%
is the CDC data.
That's right. So do those kids have protection now? What about adults? Do we have protection? And knowing that question is also very complicated because for people who weren't vaccinated, you probably have pretty good post-infection protection. But the vaccinations may actually hamper that process. You have fewer anti-N antibodies, which is a different part of the virus actually, and not having those may hurt you going forward. So that's a question we don't know. And then the other question we don't know, which is potentially even more important, is how bad is the next variant going to be? Will it be like Omicron, or will it be, more like Delta, where it is actually somewhat more dangerous to people? So, and I don't think anybody can know that either. Here's the 2 points that I would make that I can say with certainty. One is the people who should be doing the research about this are very incentivized not to do it, right? Because it all comes down to the same question, which is how badly have the vaccines failed us? And that is a question that they don't want to answer. So unless things get really bad, what you can sort of expect is the data is just going to, the data spigot is slowly going to turn off. And so, and the second question is, like, why can't we have an honest, it's related, but why can't we have an honest conversation about this? And again, the answer is the same, because an honest conversation would acknowledge that the vaccines basically have failed. But here's the thing, Clay, you're seeing the reality of this in that almost nobody is getting a second booster, a fourth shot. You're seeing the reality of this in the idea of vaccine mandates for kids is just completely off the table. So this is, and by the way, the stock prices, especially of Moderna, which is sort of the purest vaccine company. These companies, Moderna a couple of days ago was at a 1-year low. So people, and you're seeing hundreds of millions of vaccine doses in cold storage in the United States. People just are not getting vaccinated right now.
So Johnson & Johnson, we're talking to Alex Berenson, who has been one of the foremost purveyors of what I would say is truth surrounding this COVID disinformation brigade. Johnson & Johnson essentially pulled, the FDA essentially pulled the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That was the one-shot version that tens of millions of people got.
Yes.
Is that totally reflected in the data that the J&J is worse than Moderna or Pfizer, or is this like a finger in the dam to acknowledge the J&J issues while pretending that Moderna and Pfizer, there are no issues?
I think it's the latter. There's no evidence that J&J is broadly more dangerous than Moderna or Pfizer. And in fact, as a Danish scientist pointed out a few days ago, and this was an amazing thing. If you look at the data from the clinical trials, right, which is the best data, it's the only clean data we have. And unfortunately, the clinical trials were cut short last year when the companies gave everybody in the placebo arm the vaccine. So we don't have clean clinical trials anymore. But if you go back and you look at the initial cut of data that was clean, there was no advantage in all-cause mortality on the vaccine side in the Moderna and Pfizer trial. So in other words, if you got the Moderna vaccine, if you got the Pfizer vaccine, you were just as likely to die of anything, of a heart attack or COVID or a car accident or anything else, as if you got a placebo. That was not true of J&J or the AstraZeneca vaccine, which works like the J&J vaccine. In those, there was actually a notable advantage for people who got the vaccine. In other words, the vaccine actually seemed to protect people from dying broadly, which is what you would hope a vaccine would do. Now, we don't know what that really means. We don't know why that might have been. It might have been a statistical anomaly. It might have been. We don't know. Okay, but when you hear that, when you hear, hey, the vaccine actually seemed to be protective for J&J, but not for not in the not in the Moderna or Pfizer trials, you say to yourself, why would they have pulled the J&J vaccine and let the others continue? I don't know.
So how would the media be covering as we approach 1 million deaths with COVID, which is its own story? And I keep saying with COVID because obviously many of these people dying have a variety of comorbidities and may have died otherwise, and we're now in 3 years worth of tallying all these numbers. If Donald Trump had won re-election in 2020 and we're still in office and everything else is the exact same in terms of the COVID shots that are being delivered, Johnson & Johnson being pulled by the FDA, how would the media be covering, in your opinion, these COVID shots if Trump were in office compared to Biden?
That is a great question. I think you would be hearing rushed trials. You would be hearing the vaccines did not work as promised. You would be hearing we've spent, billions and billions of dollars on vaccines that look like they will never be used. You would be hearing There was a promise that these would be updated quickly against new variants, and that didn't work. You'd be hearing, we don't know what the long-term effects on immunity are because, we see that people don't seem to be developing broad immunity afterwards. You'd be hearing, why are there so many reinfections? You'd be hearing, why is it now that every time somebody gets a fourth dose, they immediately seem to come down with Omicron? I think the perspective, you'd be hearing everything that I'm asking, okay?
Yeah.
Every point, right. I would not be the only reporter in the United
media
States
would use the COVID
questions.
shots as a proxy to attack Donald Trump if he were still in office and everything else were the exact same. Instead, the media uses the COVID shots as a proxy to support people, to attack people who supported Donald Trump, right? Who may be choosing not to get the COVID shot. It's really remarkable to think about, and I think it's important to bring that to light. Okay, the other thing I'm really curious.
You would hear most of all. You said it actually. You'd hear, why is it that we're in year 3 of this and there's been 1 million deaths with / from COVID? Why have we had more deaths post-vaccines than pre? That's what you'd be hearing.
Yeah, and frankly, nobody's blaming Joe Biden for 1 million COVID deaths. Everybody blamed Donald Trump for a couple of 100,000 COVID deaths. And now we've had hundreds of thousands of more, and nobody's like, oh, this is Joe Biden's fault. They tried to hang that on Trump to cost him the 2020 election. Now, China is still staying committed, Alex, to the COVID zero policy. And their COVID zero policy has obviously led to draconian lockdowns in Shanghai. There's been fears about what might happen in Beijing. How tenable is this COVID zero policy of Chairman Xi in China? And where in the world is that heading so far as you can tell?
I mean, that's a great question. A month ago, I would have said it's impossible. The Omicron is just too, it's too contagious. They appear to be able to knock it down in these, in short term, with the draconian lockdowns. I mean, cases have gone down. You have not seen this.
Assuming they're being honest about the numbers, which is always a caveat I think we have to toss out for China.
Right, but it's if they're not, then why would they have announced what had happened in Shanghai to begin with? So
yeah, right.
It's weird. I think it's a terrible strategy. Obviously, it's a terrible strategy in general. It's certainly a terrible strategy against Omicron, which is less dangerous. And at some point, unless you're going to live like this forever, you're gonna have to take the restrictions off and let people get this and live with it. But they don't. Look, I have no idea what goes through the mind of a dictator. I have no idea why Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine. I have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. But they do appear committed to it. And I have to say that what happened in Shanghai actually is likely to just reinforce that because they did knock it down.
What else let me ask you this before. I'll close with a COVID question. I'm curious. Elon Musk came out and said he thinks Donald Trump should be allowed back on Twitter. I would presume that would work well for your likelihood of being allowed back on Twitter as well. Have you gotten any indications? And I know there's a lot of still turmoil about whether Elon Musk will buy Twitter effectively, and the stock price is jockeying a lot today. Have you gotten any indication that you would be allowed back on Twitter in an Elon Musk-owned company?
No, I have not, and I have not. He has not contacted me. I've sued Twitter, and my lawsuit is proceeding. My lawsuit survived as the motion to dismiss, which is something not a lot of people know because the media has essentially blacked it out. I mean, the mainstream media has refused to report on the fact that, Trump versus Twitter got dismissed, but Berenson versus Twitter did not. And so I'm going to get discovery that's going to allow me to understand how Twitter worked with or didn't work with the government to ban me. And so I mean, I'm very excited to know, to have that chance. I don't know what the discovery will say. That's why it's called discovery, but we'll find out. So, I mean, from my point of view, there's an even bigger issue here, which is that my free speech rights should not be dependent on Elon Musk. Okay.
Yeah.
Even if and Tesla does a lot of business in China, Elon, look, let's assume the best for Elon. Let's assume that he actually means everything he says about free speech. It doesn't matter. That's my right as an American, and California law, the California Constitution. There's lots of reasons that I should be allowed to speak freely on this incredibly important platform, and that's what I'm fighting for. And, this lawsuit is moving forward, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, you mentioned the data that you're going to share at your Substack, which I would encourage people to subscribe and or read. You can read Alex Berenson there. What else do you think people should know about the latest in data and or discussion as it pertains to COVID right now?
I just think, the number one thing is this idea that the vaccines really are, they are demonstrating zero efficacy. Certainly zero efficacy against infection and transmission. If anything, negative efficacy. And, I don't think anybody who listens to you is lining up at this point for a booster or a second booster, but I don't know why anybody would do that. And so, that's, I think, where we are. It hasn't changed that much. We will see what happens this summer in the southern states, if there's another southern surge and what that looks like.
And by the way, just to continue to reiterate, you've got young kids, I've got young kids. We haven't gotten them COVID shots. It would be crazy, in your opinion, based on the data that you look at, to be getting young kids COVID shots, particularly because 75% of them have already had it.
Crazy. It is. And that is a great point. And, if you go on lefty Twitter, epidemiology, Twitter, you see these people, we can't wait for the FDA to approve the shots for kids under 5. Look, even if that happens, I can tell you, it's going to be like 5 or 10% of the country that does that. Now, they're going to be all the people, who work for the New York Times, so yeah. You'll hear about it, but don't kid yourself. Don't be fooled. Like, no one is getting their young children vaccinated against this. Nobody with any sense.
As well they shouldn't. Alex Berenson, we appreciate the time. Go check out the Substack for Alex. He does phenomenal work there. We'll talk to you again soon. We bring in one of the really talented young writers who is doing good work every single day at the website that I sold to Fox last year, almost a year to this day, OutKick.com. I'd encourage you to add it to your repertoire of places that you go visit if you're looking for sanity in an insane world. But, Bobby, I want to start with this. It's Friday the 13th. You haven't been prepped on this. Is there a scary movie that to you is the greatest of all scary movies? Like, if you had to watch a scary movie tonight, which one would you pick and why?
So the answer has to be The Shining, Clay, right? Because out of all the goofy characters that we've seen in horror movies, nobody's been more authentically terrifying than a crazy Jack Nicholson that's stuck in that lodge all winter. So to me, when he's chasing after his family with the axe and stuff, if you turn all the lights off, nothing's more terrifying than that. And I say that as someone that saw Conjuring opening night in the theaters at about 12 a.m. when everybody started clapping when they heard those voices in the basement. That was unbelievable.
By the way, we're going to open up phone lines in the third hour, 800-282-2882. But if you are a huge horror movie fan and you want to weigh in with what people should watch tonight, given the fact it's Friday the 13th, you can load up the phone lines. We'll take some of your calls throughout the course of the remainder of the show on that topic. All right, Bobby. You do fantastic work for us at OutKick. And I couldn't believe that the NBA did this. We talk a lot at OutKick about the degree to which sports has turned into basically woke sports. It's taken over the universe of regular sports fans, and they constantly are lecturing us. And the worst in terms of lecture, I think you'd probably agree, is the NBA. And so the NBA pulled their All-Star game. We got a lot of people listening in North Carolina out of Charlotte over a transgender bathroom bill. And then they end up now going to the United Arab Emirates, which if you are gay, you can be put to death there. And it feels like OutKick, and to a certain extent Fox News, which builds on a lot of OutKick's work, are some of the only outlets even discussing this. How crazy is the hypocrisy?
Yeah, and there's no other league that gets protected by the sports media like the NBA does. I mean, this has been going on for years right now. The fear that broadcasters from ESPN and The Ringer and CBS and the New York Times have calling out the NBA is really second to none. And what I find so fascinating about this is, Clay, the NBA just turned the corner for the first time in 4 years by moving out of politics, by focusing just on the games. And what do you know? They're reaching near record highs, highest opening first round since 2014. And for some context, the NBA ratings plummeted to all-time lows when they really embraced the quote-unquote racial reckoning in the country. They put Black Lives Matter across the core. I mean, the NBA lost almost 48% of their audience when they embraced social justice messaging, and it took them 3 years to get it back. So all of a sudden, they're just now focusing back on the games, and people love it. Now they make a statement like this, they're in jeopardy, I think, again, of losing some of their more moderate political audience, which is just insane business decision.
Now, also, Phil Mickelson got destroyed to such an extent. Golfer out there who a lot of people listening to us right now play golf, I know. Phil Mickelson got destroyed for negotiating with Saudi Arabia about a new golf league, effectively. And he didn't even agree to it. He certainly didn't sign on to do it. Yet the NBA criticism is minor, relatively speaking. How can you justify Phil Mickelson getting crushed like he did for negotiating with Saudi Arabia compared to the NBA getting a pass with the United Arab Emirates?
Well, you can. That just goes back to that first point about how the media protects the NBA, particularly the sports media. I mean, Clay, you know, you and I are some of the only people that have really called out LeBron James' hypocrisy and some of the other NBA players. Right away, every time we do this, somebody from like The Athletic or The Atlantic comes after us saying, oh, well, you guys don't like because the NBA players stuck up for, you know, black rights and racial injustice and all that stuff. You get none of that when you criticize Phil Mickelson. So it doesn't surprise me that top shows like Pardon Interruption will lead an entire day condemning Phil Mickelson for thinking about going to Saudi Arabia, but not mention this because there's no pushback by going after Phil Mickelson, an old white male golfer. But going after some of these NBA players who are so active and popular on Twitter, that comes with another degree of backlash that, quite frankly, most journalists and TV anchors don't have the backbone to withstand.
Speaking of journalists and TV anchors, ESPN, I still think this is shocking. We're talking, by the way, with Bobby Burack. He does fantastic work at OutKick. Encourage you to go check out OutKick.com to read a lot of what he is doing on a day-to-day basis. ESPN stopped programming in March during the NCAA women's basketball tournament. I think a lot of people out there listening right now may not even know this, to criticize the Florida Parents' Rights Bill, which kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third graders are not going to be taught about sex-related issues. Again, ESPN on their programming stopped and had a moment of silence. Elle Duncan, I believe, is who was hosting this ridiculous charade. Yet they're not going to even say a word about the NBA going to the UAE. They claim that they cared about gay people, but as we just said, gay people can be put to death in the UAE. Same thing for the Atlanta Hawks and Milwaukee Bucks, who also have had walkout situations. What in the world is going on here that ESPN can have this woke stance as it pertains to the state of Florida for a bill that, frankly, a lot of their people aren't even smart enough to understand why they sounded like such idiots for this protest. And yet they're not going to be saying a word about the UAE or the NBA's relationship there.
Yes, Elle Duncan, like you said, goes on air during a college basketball tournament and says it's so unfair to the LGBT community that these teachers won't let the kids say gay, which obviously is not true. There's nothing in the bill that bans you from using the word gay. That's not what it does. It basically tells teachers, don't talk about sex change and transgenderism with third graders and younger. So she doesn't even know what the bill says, but she interrupts a game to spread that talking point saying this is an attack on the LGBT community. Then she goes on Twitter a little after saying, well, I have friends that are LGBT, so it's my job to use my large platform to stand up for them and protect them. Yet, like you said, the NBA, the league that she claims to be her favorite, is now partnering up with a country that if you're gay, they're allowed to punish you by death. Moreover, Clay, Elle Duncan is frequently interacting with Joy Reid on Twitter, who posted a bunch of homophobic posts on her blog a couple years ago.
Of course.
So Elle Duncan brands herself as the gay rights activist at ESPN, yet she's talking with Joy Reid and not saying a word about the NBA dealing with a country that can kill you for being gay. So to me, there's no bigger fraud at ESPN than her. There's a lot of people on that list that consider her right now. I think she's in a league of her own.
She's a clown. and she's a hypocrite. And frankly, I'm not even sure she's smart enough to understand how much of a clown and a hypocrite she is. But it's part of the larger network environment that ESPN has created. Bobby, for people who may not be super plugged in the world of sports, how left-wing is the sports media that covers sports? Because we talk a lot about the left-wing bias in politics from MSNBC and Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and all of these outlets that everybody immediately recognizes and acknowledges has that left-wing bias. A lot of times the ESPNs of the world slide under the radar, and the extreme left-wing bias of the sports media outside of places like OutKick almost doesn't even get called out at all.
Right, and I don't think there's anybody more qualified to talk about this than you and I, because I don't think anybody on a daily basis delves into both the political media landscape and the sports media landscape like we do. And yeah, there is a perspective that news media leans left, which it absolutely does, but the sports media leans in that direction so much further, because here's the thing. The reason with sports media is that most of the people are sort of bitter, and they feel like they need to prove what side they're on. You see so many people just never miss an opportunity to call somebody racist for something that's not racist. At least in the news media, you have alternative outlets that can push back on that prominent outlets. Until OutKick, there was nobody in the sports media space that could even give a moderate opinion, just to push back and say, wait a minute, what you're saying is not factual, that all these sports anchors saying that this bill prohibits the word of gay. If there wasn't OutKick, there would not be a single website that covers sports that would have said that. So I think the biggest thing is there is less of a voice in alternative sports media than there is in news media. And I find that so unfortunate, because I go to a sports bar or go to a sports game, and I think so many people are just so fed up with what's going on, but their voices are not represented because so much of the sports conversation for so long has been dictated by ESPN, the Washington Post, NBC Sports, all of which lean probably as far left as CNN, and in ESPN's case, as far left as MSNBC.
I don't think there's any doubt. If you enjoy this conversation and you want to have a little bit of sanity in your sports life, I'd encourage you to check out Bobby Burack. Also, check out OutKick.com. Bobby, by the way, data also out there. Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game out of Georgia because they said that it was Jim Crow 2.0. So the voting has surged in Georgia. Another lie, another thing that sports got wrong.
Yeah, I think my favorite one is actually, I think when Biden called it Jim Crow on steroids. Jim Crow 2.0 is pretty good, but Jim Crow on steroids is even better. Yeah, this is just another example of sort of these sports companies and major corporations acting irrationally out of fear. So what happened here is MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, he saw the push to say that Georgia's bills were holding black people back. It was an example of voter suppression. So he felt he needed to make a statement to show everybody, well, he's not a racist. You can't call me a racist. I pulled the All-Star game out of Atlanta. But as you say, it didn't suppress any votes. Voting is up double since 2018. And moreover, what ended up happening, he took the All-Star game to Colorado, which arguably has more stringent voting laws than Georgia. And in the meantime, he ended up just taking money away from black-owned businesses in Atlanta. So what did he accomplish? Nothing.
Thankfully, the Braves won the World Series and got to host 3 World Series games instead. Bobby, keep up the good work. Appreciate it, my man.
Clay, appreciate it.
We are joined now by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who is in the news right now. We're going to ask him a little bit about COVID as well, but in the news right now because, Senator, and you can explain it to the audience, you are simply asking for a inspector general to be able to review how we are spending $40 billion in aid for Ukraine. That seems like an eminently reasonable request. What in the world is going on that is being right now refused to add that to the bill?
You know, I think it's fiscally irresponsible to spend $40 billion with insufficient oversight. The Afghan war, went on for 20 years, started out slow, and then went on for 20 years. But we do have a special inspector general who's followed this. He's written entire books on the waste, and much of it has really at least slowed down the thieves. I mean, there are thieves everywhere. When government's handing out money, the thieves line up as well. And if you want to slow them down, you have to let them know there's going to be an inspector that looks at every dollar that's spent. In Afghanistan, we would give like $90 million to build a hotel, a luxury hotel. Why we're doing that in the first place is one question. But then they would build half of a hotel or a third of the hotel, and the contractor would run off with the money. We found out about that because of the special inspector general for Afghanistan. And so we advised that since this guy has a great track record and he's still got money in his budget, why don't we immediately turn it over to them? They're very, very capable. They're already up and running. We don't have to wait a year for the president to appoint somebody. We just put it into the bailiwick of an already existing inspector general. And, apparently Republicans and Democrats are so eager to send our money to a foreign country, they don't want to have any sufficient oversight.
I find it impossible to believe that this would be remotely controversial, given what we just saw, and you know it better than anybody, Senator, the wasted money in PPP dollars. I mean, billions of dollars that we wasted trying to run that program. Why would we not use an existing infrastructure program that we already have to monitor our own government spending and apply it to Ukraine as well? What are they trying? Why are they afraid of this?
They're always more eager to send the money out than they are to be responsible with it. And look, this is how we got a $30 trillion, debt. This isn't Republicans and Democrats don't have a good track record on spending your money. I mean, this is a government that spent $1.5 million to study of taking a selfie of yourself while smiling, if that would make you happy if you looked at that selfie later on in the day. So it's a government's chock full of waste.
No doubt. I obviously totally understand what you're doing here and support it, and a lot of our listeners do as well. You're being criticized, which is the normal routine now. Anytime you don't submit to everything that Ukraine wants, you are pro-Russia. How would you respond to the argument out there that is being made by some of the left-wing loons that the reason you're doing this is because you're being a stooge for Vladimir Putin or for Russia?
I took an oath of office. My oath of allegiance is to the United States and to the U.S. Constitution. No other nation, no matter how sympathetic we are, I'm sympathetic to Ukraine. I want Putin to be defeated. I think what he did is an awful aggression. But my oath of office is to my country. If we bankrupt our country, who's left to help anyone? So I'm for selling arms to Ukraine. I'm for sharing things with Ukraine. But we gave them $14 billion 2 weeks ago. And the thing is once we get to $60 billion, it will be more or about the same that Russia spends in an entire year, plus what Europe is giving them. So, it's sort of the same argument that President Trump made. Everybody needs to step up, but the NATO allies need to step up, and we don't need to be the sugar daddy and the policeman of the world that we have to do everything. We can help, sure. But $40 billion will now make it in the space of 2 months. We'll have given almost as much as Russia spends in a year. And we should look at this. In Afghanistan, you realize we were giving them, I think it was $250 million every 3 months in $100 bills. I'm not making this up. Pallets of $100 bills were airlifted into Afghanistan every 3 months for 20 years. So, yes, the American government has a terrible history, and the guy that oversaw the waste and told us about the waste that happened in Afghanistan, this special inspector is perfectly poised to do it, and they don't want him in particular because they know he will ferret out the waste and he will point out the abuse.
We're talking to Senator Rand Paul. You're also a doctor, and a lot of people, certainly we've done it on this show, are pointing out the incongruity here, Senator, of sending $40 billion to Ukraine while simultaneously many moms and dads are unable to find baby formula on the shelves right now. And in fact, Jen Psaki said, hey, what would you tell? I'm sure you saw this clip. She said, what would you have parents do who can't find baby formula? She said, I'd have them call their doctors. What in the world is going on here that we can spend $40 billion on Ukraine, but we can't get baby formula on our shelves in this country?
Yeah, it's misplaced priorities. We spend, about $6 million on cancer research, and we're spending $40 billion on this. So the thing is money should never be given in one huge lump sum without oversight. It's a bad idea. But we don't have the money. We will borrow this money from China to send it to Ukraine. It's not like we have a big vat of money, a big rainy day account. We just say, well, we've done very well this year. Why don't we send some of it to help somebody else fight for democracy? This is equivalent to that if you want to help someone in your community and you don't have any money, you say, you know what, I'll go down to the bank and I'll borrow $1,000 and I'm going to give it to the Salvation Army. Well, it might sound noble, but it isn't noble to give people money you don't have. We're $1 trillion short every year, and then they started going crazy on the COVID bailouts, and we added $6 trillion more in the last 2 years. We have double-digit inflation. The lockdown has still so completely screwed up the economy. We don't have baby formula. So, yes, I think there are priorities. We can be helpful in the world, but we are not the sole repository of all the money in the world, and we shouldn't shovel it out so fast without oversight that it actually hurts our country. Like I said, I'm sympathetic to Ukraine, but my allegiance is to my country. I have to make sure that the United States is doing okay before we give away the house or give away the farm.
Our good friend Flip Flop Fauci came out, Senator, and said the pandemic's over. And then now he's come walk that back and says, oh, no, the pandemic's not over at all. And the Biden White House is now saying we may have 100 million new COVID cases in the fall and the winter. Based on your experience as a doctor, how would you assess the way that COVID is going right now? And what should the government be doing, if anything, as we get ready for the summer?
The first thing that everybody needs to know is if you test 1,000 people randomly anywhere in America, you'll find that 97% or more have immunity. They either got the immunity from the vaccine or they got the immunity from having the disease or both. 75% of kids under 11. By the fall, it's going to be 100% of all the kids under 11 will have had this. For better or worse, that's with vaccine, without vaccine, people are still going to get it. But the good news is almost everybody in our country has some form of immunity, so we're going to be okay with this no matter what happens. Nobody can predict the exact case count. But if you want to know whether or not to pay attention to Dr. Fauci, I'll tell you this. When the U.S. federal court struck down the mandate on wearing masks on planes, Dr. Fauci said, how dare the courts, how dare the Constitution, how dare anybody that believes in individual freedom say anything about his mandates, because by golly, he is science, and how dare the courts. That is an arrogance we have never seen in an elected official, much less a bureaucrat. He believes that the courts and their interpretation of the Constitution have nothing to do and should have no oversight on his dictates. That is about the most un-American policy and proposal and attitude I've ever heard of.
I appreciate you bringing up the airplanes as well there, because the last time we talked to you, you were having a press conference at the Nashville airport in favor of the removal of mask mandates. Since that has happened, no great surprise to you or me or many of our listeners, but I do think it's worth mentioning. We haven't seen a massive airline shortage based on sickness. There haven't been hardly any cancellations. Overall, complaints and issues between passengers and people working on those planes have plummeted. How do we keep the mask mandate from being returned going forward?
And it's night and day. When you travel in the airport, people are alive again. People are friendly. TSA agents are patting me on the back and thanking me. The flight attendants are coming up and wanting their pictures taken, saying, thank you so much for getting rid of these ridiculous things. So we have to, let people know the numbers. But I can tell you this, if the Democrats want to get wiped out in November, look at the unofficial poll in the airport. 97% of the people disagree with Fauci, are discounting his advice, and their assessment of the risk is they don't need the mask. 97% of the people, if the Democrats want to campaign on mandates, on Fauci bringing the mandates back, on the courts bringing it back, they are completely insane, and they're going to be wiped out in the fall because 97% of travelers don't want to wear a mask.
Did you win the 80-1 long shot bid on the Kentucky Derby this past weekend? Did you have any success there?
Oh, I only wish I saw that horse. That horse would not get in the gate. He was jumping all over the place. I should have bet on that horse. And then you see he wins the race, and he's still fighting with the other horses. Talk about moxie. Man, that horse had some moxie. Now, I did bet on the horse that was trained in Bowling Green, where I live, and it got second. It was the favorite, and I did, of course, win, place, and show. So I took away less than I put in, but we usually consider that sort of a Pyrrhic victory.
No doubt. By the way, Bowling Green's a great town in Kentucky for people who haven't been there before. It's also Friday the 13th. And if I'm not mistaken, Halloween, the original Halloween was set in Bowling Green, Kentucky, wasn't it?
I'm not positive of that. There is a connection somehow to the producer, but I'm not sure if it was actually filmed there. But I can tell you for certain we do make the Corvette. We are home of the Corvette.
That's great. It's a great museum there as well. Appreciate the time, Senator. Have a fantastic weekend and appreciate all the fights you're fighting for us.
Thanks, guys.